Imagine strolling through your favorite park on a crisp evening, only to notice a small, shivering puppy curled up in a quiet corner night after night. What sorrow could drive such a tiny soul to seek refuge under the open sky? Stay with us as we unravel a story filled with raw emotion, unexpected vulnerability, and a mystery that will touch your heart. Each evening, as the sun dipped beyond the horizon, a quiet ritual unfolded at Maplewood Dog Park. While joggers ran their usual routes and children played, a lone puppy with soft, matted fur and deep, soulful eyes would retreat to a secluded spot beneath an old oak tree. Despite the cool air and the cheerful chaos around him, he returned unfailingly, as if waiting for something or someone to bring him solace. Officer Daniel Rivera, a compassionate and dedicated member of the local police force, had been patrolling the park on his nightly rounds when he first noticed the little dog. Over several evenings, he observed the pup's unwavering vigil, its small body curled up tightly against the night's chill. Something about the dog's quiet sorrow stirred something deep within Rivera. One evening, unable to ignore the puppy's silent suffering any longer, Rivera approached with a warm blanket and some food. As he knelt, the tiny creature lifted its gaze, its eyes brimming with an unmistakable grief. The raw emotion in that moment overwhelmed Rivera, and to his own surprise, he broke down in tears. That tearful encounter marked the beginning of his mission, a quest to uncover the truth behind the puppy's nightly refuge, a mystery that would soon reveal layers of loss and the unexpected power of human compassion. Each evening at Maplewood Dog Park, as twilight softened the edges of the day, an unspoken mystery played out. The park, once simply a lively haven for families and their pets, had in recent weeks become the setting for a quiet, poignant routine. While passers-by paid little attention, one small stray puppy made his nightly appearance. With his scruffy, unkempt fur and eyes that held an indescribable sadness, the puppy would settle under the oak tree, far from the playground's laughter and the bustle of the world. Night after night, he remained, seemingly undisturbed by the cool breeze or the distant echoes of children playing. Officer Daniel Rivera, known for his empathy and dedication, had noticed the puppy during his regular patrols. At first, he thought little of it, assuming the dog was simply another stray in search of shelter. But as the nights passed and the routine remained unbroken, Rivera found himself drawn to the scene. There was something in those quiet, longing eyes that felt like a plea for help, for companionship, for understanding. One crisp evening, as the street lamps cast soft halos over the dew-kissed grass, Rivera made his decision. He parked his cruiser near the oak tree and stepped out, his breath visible in the cool air. Moving carefully so as not to startle the small creature, he knelt beside it, offering food and a warm blanket. At first, the puppy hesitated, wary of the stranger before him. But eventually, as if sensing the kindness in Rivera's gesture, he allowed the officer to come closer. And in that brief moment, when their eyes met, grief mirroring grief, something in Rivera cracked. The weight of the puppy's silent sorrow became unbearable, and for the first time in his career, Rivera broke down. His colleagues would later recall how the usually composed officer was visibly shaken, his steady demeanor shattered by the rawness of the moment. By the next day, whispers of Rivera's emotional encounter had spread through the community. The crying cop became the subject of local conversations, at coffee shops, in neighborhood centers, and among the regular visitors of Maplewood Dog Park. Some saw his vulnerability as a testament to the depth of his compassion, while others questioned whether such emotion could compromise his duty. At the station, reactions among his fellow officers were mixed. Some admired his kindness, believing that his empathy made him a better officer. Others, however, expressed concern, worried that his emotional involvement might cloud his judgment. During a morning roll call, Sergeant Lopez, a senior officer, pulled Rivera aside. "I respect what you're doing, Daniel," Lopez said in a measured tone. "But don't let your heart get in the way of your duty. We're here to enforce the law, not get tangled up in sentiment." Rivera met his gaze with quiet determination. "Sometimes, Sergeant," he replied, "caring is exactly what the law needs. Despite the growing scrutiny, Rivera remained resolute. He was determined to uncover the puppy's story, where it had come from, why it returned to the park every night, and whether anything could be done to ease its sorrow. His search for answers led him to conversations with park regulars. Mrs. Jenkins, an elderly woman who had been feeding the ducks at the pond for years, offered a quiet confession. "I've seen that little pup every night," she said. "I always thought he was waiting for someone who would never come." Her wistful tone hinted at her own losses, and Rivera realized that, in some way, the puppy's loneliness reflected that of so many forgotten souls in the community. Rivera also visited the local animal shelter, where he met Carla Martinez, a dedicated volunteer. Carla had heard rumors of the stray puppy and confirmed that reports of a small dog wandering the area had reached the shelter. "But he never lets anyone bring him in," she said, gently stroking a rescued dog. "It's like he's waiting for something, or someone." Her words deepened Rivera's resolve. He began keeping detailed notes in a small journal, documenting the puppy's habits, the weather, and any insights from the community. Patterns started to emerge. The puppy seemed to shiver more on colder nights, and his eyes appeared especially sorrowful after heavy rain. It was as if the weather mirrored his internal state, revealing the emotional weight he carried. With each passing night, Rivera felt an increasing responsibility for the tiny creature. What had begun as a routine patrol observation had turned into something deeply personal. The puppy, he believed, was more than just a stray. He was a symbol of resilience, of longing, and perhaps of hope. Determined to find answers, Rivera decided to dedicate his off-duty hours to the search. Had the puppy been abandoned? Was he lost? Did he once belong to a family that still searched for him? The questions swirled in his mind as he prepared to uncover the truth. Then, one fateful evening, Rivera made a discovery that changed everything. While walking his usual route through the park, he noticed something glinting at the base of the oak tree. Kneeling down, he carefully lifted a small, worn leather collar from beneath a pile of fallen leaves. Attached to it was an engraved tag, its inscription faded with time. As he read the words, a chill ran down his spine. The tag bore a name he recognized. But more than that, it held a date tied to a long-forgotten tragedy in the community. Rivera's heart pounded as he realized what he had just uncovered. The key to the puppy's past, the answer to the mystery that had haunted the park for so long, was now in his hands. And with it, the final pieces of a heartbreaking yet hopeful story were about to come together. The weight of the past pressed heavily on Officer Rivera's shoulders as he stood beneath the old oak tree, the place that had become a silent monument to an unresolved tragedy. The stray puppy curled up at its roots, oblivious to the storm of emotions swirling in the officer's chest. It wasn't just a lost animal anymore. It was a living remnant of a shattered past, a quiet witness to the pain that had once gripped this town. Every night spent under the branches wasn't just an act of solitude. It was a vigil, a waiting, a longing for something that might never return. Rivera had always thought himself a man of logic, duty, and discipline, but this case had unraveled something inside him. The discovery of the faded photograph, Emma's bright smile beaming from the past as she cradled a puppy that looked just like this one, sent a chill through his spine. It was more than coincidence. It was as if time itself had preserved a memory that refused to be erased. With trembling fingers, he traced the old image, the ghostly imprint of innocence and love staring back at him. He couldn't let this go. He wouldn't. Reaching out to a retired detective who had once worked on Emma's case, Rivera sifted through years of archived evidence. Old reports, blurred witness testimonies, and scattered rumors all painted a picture of a town haunted by loss. The puppy, it seemed, had never been adopted or taken in after Emma's disappearance. Instead, whispers suggested it had simply wandered off, frightened and alone, clinging to a place that had once felt like home. The thought made Rivera's chest tighten. How many nights had this tiny creature waited in vain, curled up beneath the oak, longing for a girl who would never return? As the pieces started falling into place, the impact rippled far beyond Rivera. Within the precinct, his colleagues sensed the change in him. He was no longer just another officer on patrol. He was a man possessed by the need for truth. Even the usually stern Sergeant Lopez, who had once warned him against letting emotions cloud his judgment, began to see things differently. Perhaps, for once, the job wasn't about enforcing laws. It was about healing wounds that had festered too long in silence. Outside the station, the community stirred. Maplewood Dog Park, once a quiet haven for casual strollers and dog lovers, became a place of hushed conversations and knowing glances. Mrs. Jenkins, the elderly woman who had fed the ducks for years, sat on her usual bench, her voice trembling as she spoke to those who would listen. She remembered Emma, the way she would run through the park, laughter ringing through the air as she played with her puppy. The realization that this stray might be that same beloved companion shook her to the core. The story spread like wildfire, igniting something long buried within the town. Calls flooded the local animal shelter, people moved by the story, desperate to help in any way they could. Volunteer Carla Martinez found herself overwhelmed by the response. To many, the stray wasn't just a dog anymore. He was a symbol, a reminder of the pain, the love, and the resilience that defined their shared history. Carla organized a gathering at the shelter, a space for people to come together and speak about Emma, about the past, about what had been lost and what might still be found. The room filled with quiet murmurs, tearful recollections, and hopeful determination. The town was waking up to its past, and with it, a desire for closure. At the police station, Rivera's nights grew longer. He pored over old newspaper clippings, case files, anything that could fill the gaps left by time. One night, in the dim glow of his desk lamp, he spoke in hushed tones to Detective Morales, his trusted mentor. He admitted what had been gnawing at him, the weight pressing down on his chest. This wasn't just about a stray. This was about a little girl who had been loved, who had been lost, and who deserved to be remembered. Morales, a veteran of too many cold cases, understood. Some cases were more than just investigations. They were calls for justice, for compassion, for remembering the forgotten. As whispers of the story began seeping into local media, the town's leaders could no longer ignore it. Charlotte Green, a relentless advocate for truth and transparency, took the podium at a city council meeting. Her voice rang clear and firm. This town had spent too long rewriting history with silence. Emma's story mattered. The people's pain mattered. They could not allow the past to be buried beneath bureaucracy and indifference. The town responded. A memorial service was planned for Emma, a gathering beneath the oak tree where the stray had waited for so long. That crisp Saturday morning, people arrived, some carrying flowers, others simply standing in quiet reverence. The plaque was unveiled, its inscription simple yet profound, in loving memory of Emma. May every lost soul find a way home. The puppy lay at the foot of the tree, his small frame rising and falling with each breath, unaware of the weight of the moment, but somehow a part of it all. But just as the town began to process this revelation, new shadows crept into view. A local historian, Anthony Reed, approached Rivera with an unsettling pattern. Emma's case wasn't the only one. Over the years, children had gone missing, pets had vanished, and stories had faded into obscurity. There were gaps, holes in the history of Maplewood that suggested something more sinister beneath the surface. Rivera's investigation took on a new urgency. He combed through old records, sought out the memories of those who had lived through it all. Meanwhile, Carla Martinez received an anonymous tip about a long-forgotten breeder, a man whose financial ruin had led to desperate measures. The pieces didn't yet fit together, but something about the tip gnawed at her. Could it be that the puppy, the same one who had unknowingly rekindled an entire town's grief, was part of a larger, more complex mystery? Journalist Olivia Reed, never one to let a story slip through her fingers, began digging into the town's past as well. Anonymous emails landed in her inbox, revealing financial irregularities at Riverdale Medical Center, suggesting missing funds and buried programs, initiatives that could have once helped children like Emma. The deeper she dug, the clearer it became. Someone, somewhere, had wanted certain truths to stay hidden. Within the precinct, tension simmered. Some officers stood by Rivera, recognizing the importance of what he was uncovering. Others scoffed, unwilling to let sentiment interfere with duty. "We're here to enforce the law, not chase ghosts," one veteran officer muttered. But even his words lacked conviction. Something was shifting. At the park, Mrs. Jenkins found herself at the center of a quiet movement. Her memories, once simply the musings of an elderly woman feeding ducks, now carried weight. She organized a neighborhood meeting, bringing together those who had been in Maplewood long enough to remember. People shared their recollections of Emma, of other missing children, of a past that had always felt incomplete. What had started as a simple act of kindness toward a stray had become something much larger. The town was waking up, its past no longer content to remain buried. Every memory shared, every faded photograph unearthed, every tear shed was another step toward the truth. Rivera stood beneath the oak tree once more, the puppy nestled against his boot. He didn't know where this path would lead, but one thing was certain: Emma's story wasn't over. And as long as he had breath in his lungs, he would make sure it was told. A scream shattered the stillness of Maplewood Dog Park. Officer Rivera, who had been conducting his usual patrol near the oak tree, immediately broke into a sprint toward the source of the cry. His pulse pounded in his ears as he spotted a woman standing rigid under the moonlight, her arm outstretched, pointing at the ground. Rivera's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating what had caused the outcry, a freshly unearthed patch of soil, disturbed as if someone had been digging there recently. The stray puppy stood a few feet away, its head tilted, watching the humans with innocent curiosity. Rivera crouched, his breath shallow, brushing aside the loose dirt. Something cold and metallic caught the light. He pulled out what appeared to be an old, rusted locket, half buried beneath the soil. A hush fell over the group of bystanders who had gathered. An elderly woman gasped. "That looks like Emma's locket," she murmured. Rivera swallowed hard, wiping the dirt off with his sleeve. He had seen this locket before in one of the old case files. It had belonged to Emma, a gift from her mother on her 10th birthday, the last personal belonging she had on record before she disappeared. But how had it ended up here, buried beneath the oak tree where the stray puppy kept his nightly watch? The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. Speculations ran wild. Theories flooded online forums and social media. Some believed it was a cruel hoax. Others whispered of ghosts, of unfinished business, of the past clawing its way into the present. But Rivera had no time for theories. He needed answers. Determined to uncover the truth, he delved deeper into Emma's cold case, poring over old newspaper clippings, witness testimonies, and forensic reports. The more he read, the more uneasy he became. The initial investigation had been riddled with inconsistencies, overlooked details, and unverified claims. Witness statements contradicted each other. Key evidence had gone missing. It was as if someone had deliberately muddied the waters, ensuring that the truth remained buried. One night, as Rivera sat in his patrol car outside the precinct, exhausted and lost in thought, his phone buzzed with another anonymous message. "You're getting too close. Stop digging." His blood ran cold. He scanned his surroundings, searching for anyone suspicious, but the street was empty. He considered reporting the message to his superiors, but after the mixed reactions from his colleagues, he wasn't sure whom he could trust. At the same time, Carla Martinez continued her own investigation at the animal shelter. She had managed to track down a former employee of the defunct breeder, a man who had worked there years ago, before it had shut down under mysterious circumstances. They met in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. The man, a wiry figure with deep-set eyes, looked around nervously before speaking. "The family that ran that place, they were involved in more than just breeding dogs," he said in a low voice. "There were rumors about missing kids, about something they were hiding. When the place got shut down, a lot of records disappeared. I always wondered if the police were covering for someone." Carla's grip on her coffee cup tightened. "Do you remember anything about a little girl named Emma?" The man hesitated. Then, as if making a decision, he pulled out an old, worn photograph from his wallet. "This is the only proof I have," he whispered. Carla's breath caught in her throat. The photo was faded, but there was no mistaking it. It was Emma, holding a tiny puppy in her arms, standing in front of the breeder's facility. Her mind raced. The anonymous tip about the puppy, the missing case files, the buried locket, it was all connected. Someone had gone to great lengths to erase the past, but why? Meanwhile, Rivera received another clue, an address scrawled on the same type of paper as the ones he had found beneath the oak tree. The location pointed to an abandoned farmhouse on the outskirts of town. Late that night, armed with only his flashlight and growing resolve, he drove out to the desolate structure. The wind howled through broken windows, and the floorboards creaked under his weight as he stepped inside. Dust motes floated in the beam of his flashlight as he scanned the room. He noticed something strange in the corner, a pile of discarded belongings, children's toys, an old backpack. His heart pounded as he recognized the faded initials embroidered on the fabric, EW. Emma Williams. A sudden noise behind him made him spin around, his hand instinctively reaching for his firearm. A shadow moved in the doorway. "You should have left this alone, officer." The voice was calm, deliberate, but laced with something chilling. The figure stepped into the dim light, revealing an older man, his eyes dark with something unreadable. Rivera tightened his grip on his gun. "Who are you?" The man gave a slow smile. "Someone who knows the truth. But the truth doesn't always set you free, officer. Sometimes it buries you." At that moment, Rivera realized he was in far deeper than he had ever imagined, and he wasn't sure if he would make it out alive. Rivera sat with Officer Simmons, reviewing the latest developments in their case. Simmons, once skeptical, admitted, "I used to think cases like these were just about one lost animal. But now, I see they touch on something much deeper. Memories of families lost, communities fractured by tragedy." Their conversation forged an unexpected bond between them, bridging the gap between professional detachment and personal empathy. Rivera's determination to uncover the truth became a rallying point within his unit, shifting perspectives even among those who had initially dismissed his emotional investment. Meanwhile, the local media played a crucial role in bringing the case to the public eye. Olivia Reed, an investigative journalist with an unyielding sense of purpose, organized a roundtable discussion at a community hall. Former law enforcement officers, local historians, and members of the affected families gathered, their voices weaving a complex narrative of unresolved pain. Heated but constructive debates unfolded, and one retired detective recalled how cases of missing children and vanished pets were often intertwined in the town's unsolved mysteries. "It's as if every stray that appears here carries the story of a family that never got closure," he said, his words sending a ripple of unease through the room. Olivia's ability to blend hard evidence with deeply personal stories expanded the investigation's reach. Her blog became a living archive, featuring old newspaper clippings, faded photographs, and handwritten notes from residents recalling the tragic disappearance of Emma. These contributions transformed the case into a true community effort. During a neighborhood meeting organized by Charlotte Green, a local activist, new voices joined the chorus. A young mother, tears in her eyes, said, "We all have pieces of the past that we wish we could understand better. This isn't just about one case. It's about reclaiming our collective memory." Her words resonated deeply, leading to the creation of an online forum where residents could anonymously share recollections, photographs, and even old home videos. As these fragments of history surfaced, the lines between personal grief and public accountability blurred. The stray puppy's silent vigil under the oak tree, once a lonely act of survival, became a symbol of the community's longing for reconciliation with its past. Each shared memory, each tear shed at a town meeting, each long-forgotten clue added weight to the investigation. But with progress came resistance. The emerging evidence forced a confrontation between those desperate for the truth and those determined to keep the past buried. One overcast evening, Rivera gathered a small group of officers at the station. With his notebook spread open before him, he laid out the latest discoveries. A torn scrap of paper bearing a mysterious address, a faded photograph linking the puppy to Emma's past, and testimonies from longtime park regulars. Every clue, Rivera insisted, suggests this isn't just about a stray. It's about a family shattered by loss and a town that's been left with unanswered questions. His conviction stirred both empathy and unease. Some officers were moved by his passion, but others feared that revisiting old tragedies would blur the line between duty and sentimentality. In a tense breakroom debate, Sergeant Lopez voiced his concern. "We have our hands full with current cases. Delving into the past could jeopardize our focus." Yet, younger officers and even some seasoned colleagues found themselves reluctantly agreeing with Rivera. Justice for Emma and closure for the town mattered just as much as any active case. Outside the precinct, the town's reaction grew increasingly divided. At a town hall meeting, emotions ran high. "We've been silenced for too long," a local mother declared, her voice shaking with grief and determination. "If the truth about Emma and that little dog comes out, we might finally begin to heal." But others resisted, arguing that unearthing the past would only reopen old wounds. Tensions mounted, with accusations flying. Some called the investigation a publicity stunt, while others demanded transparency no matter the pain it might cause. Meanwhile, in the shadows of Maplewood Dog Park, unease festered. A mysterious figure had been spotted lingering near the oak tree after dark. Whispers circulated online. Was this someone trying to suppress the truth, or another lost soul tangled in the web of a long-buried tragedy? At the local animal shelter, Carla Martinez found herself at odds with fellow volunteers. While she believed in uncovering the puppy's origins, others feared that dwelling on the painful past could overshadow their mission to care for the animals in the present. "We're here to save lives," one volunteer argued. But Carla countered, understanding the full story might be the key to reuniting families, not just rescuing animals. As the conflicts reached a boiling point, Rivera received a call from a local historian. His voice trembled with urgency. "I found something," he said. "That address. It's tied to a neighborhood that once thrived with tight-knit families. This could explain why that puppy returns to the park every night, as if it's waiting for someone who's never coming back." Rivera's pulse quickened. The mystery had outgrown the park. It was now threatening to engulf the entire town. With mounting pressure from the media, Olivia Reed's latest exposé delved even deeper, drawing national attention. Her haunting images of the stray puppy curled beneath the oak tree became a rallying cry. Protests erupted, with residents demanding action. "Honor Emma's memory," signs read. The weight of the past pressed down on the town, demanding to be acknowledged. Then came the breaking point. A special meeting was called at the community center. Officer Rivera, activists, historians, and even hesitant members of law enforcement gathered, all with one goal: to decide, once and for all, how to confront the past. Charlotte Green stood at the podium, her voice firm. "We are not here to rehash old sorrows," she declared. "We are here to demand accountability and to give our lost ones the dignity they deserve." Rivera took the floor, his voice steady but charged with emotion. "For months, I patrolled these grounds and watched a small life endure silent grief, night after night. That puppy is not just a stray. It's a symbol of a family's loss, a town's unspoken tragedy. We can't let fear or bureaucracy stop us from facing the truth." His words ignited debate. A senior officer pushed back. "We are duty-bound to uphold the law, not be swayed by sentiment." But Rivera didn't waver. Acknowledging the past isn't sentimentality. It's justice. The room fell silent before a young mother stood up. "I lost my brother to a tragedy that was buried. If we let these stories remain hidden, we aren't healing. We're just burying our grief deeper." Her words shattered the last of the resistance. Then Charlotte Green made a bold proposal. "Let's form a joint task force, community leaders, law enforcement, historians. We'll oversee a full-scale, independent investigation." The room hesitated. The weight of such a decision loomed over them. But when the vote was cast, the majority agreed. The task force was formed. As the meeting adjourned, Rivera stepped outside into the cool night. The town was no longer looking away. They were ready to confront their history, to reclaim their lost narratives. And under the oak tree, unaware of the storm swirling around him, the stray puppy curled into a ball, still waiting. But now, for the first time in years, someone was finally listening. The stray puppy, now affectionately named Hope, nestled against Officer Daniel Rivera's side. The night's chill felt less biting, replaced by the quiet warmth of solidarity and the promise of change. In that defining moment, every whispered conversation and every impassioned plea had led to this, the brink of a public reckoning. The stage was set for a final confrontation, one that would begin the long-overdue process of healing in a community haunted by unresolved sorrow. As the sun dipped below the horizon on a particularly cold evening, the town of Maplewood held its breath. Weeks of investigations, heated debates, and painful recollections had brought tensions to a boiling point. Around the Maplewood Dog Park, where the investigation had taken root, hushed conversations and anxious glances passed between residents. Everyone knew the truth could no longer remain in the shadows. Officer Rivera, the man who had spearheaded the joint task force alongside community leaders and local historians, stood beneath the park's ancient oak tree. His worn notebook was filled with cryptic addresses, old photographs, and testimonies linking Hope to a tragic case, the disappearance of a little girl named Emma. Across town, at the community center, the newly assembled task force convened with urgency. Activists, law enforcement officials, and even skeptical local politicians had gathered, their discussions charged with both anxiety and determination. At the center of it all was Charlotte Green, the unwavering activist whose relentless pursuit of justice had given the town a voice. She stood before the assembly, her words steady yet filled with emotion. "Tonight," she declared, "we stand at the edge of revelation. For too long, the past has haunted us, but we are ready to face it, no matter how painful it may be." The room buzzed with murmurs of agreement, but just as the task force prepared to take the next step, coordinating with local media to unveil their findings, a startling development sent a chill through the gathering. A senior detective had just finished reviewing new security footage from Maplewood Dog Park. The grainy images revealed a shadowy figure, clad in a dark jacket, lingering near the oak tree where Hope slept each night. "There's someone here," the detective reported, his voice tense. "They're watching the park, monitoring the puppy." A wave of unease spread through the room. If someone was actively trying to keep secrets buried, the stakes were higher than they had ever imagined. Officer Rivera's pulse quickened. This mystery wasn't just deep, it was dangerous. "We must protect the evidence," he said, his voice resolute. "No one will silence the truth." Outside the community center, the crisp night air carried an eerie silence. The park, once a place of peaceful routine, now felt like a battleground of secrets and revelations. As news of the shadowy figure spread through social media, concerned residents discreetly gathered near the park. Their whispers filled the cold night, speculating on who might be behind the efforts to keep the truth buried. Among them was Olivia Reed, the relentless journalist whose reporting had kept the town informed. That evening, she released a breaking news update. "This is not just a story about a stray puppy," she wrote. "This is about how far those in power will go to keep painful truths hidden, and we will not let them." Her words ignited a firestorm online. The town demanded answers. They demanded justice. Back at the community center, the task force worked through the night, finalizing plans to secure the evidence and prepare for a public press conference. The urgency in the air was undeniable. This wasn't just about Emma's disappearance anymore. It was about the integrity of an entire community. As midnight approached, Officer Rivera stood beneath the ancient oak tree. Hope, as always, was by his side, his small frame curled up in peaceful slumber. Rivera clutched a worn leather collar, the one that had set this entire investigation in motion. Tonight he would make the call. With a deep breath, he dialed the number engraved on the tag. The phone rang. Once, twice. Then a voice answered. A woman. "This is Emma's aunt," she said, her voice trembling. In the moments that followed, she revealed everything. Emma had been taken. The puppy had been her last companion in those desperate days. And someone had been working to keep the truth buried. As the revelation spread through the task force, a hush fell over the room, quickly followed by an explosion of emotion. Tears, shouts, whispers of disbelief. The town had waited too long for this moment. At dawn, the entire community gathered at the park, their breath visible in the cold morning air. The press conference was about to begin. Councilwoman Rivera, no relation to Officer Rivera, stepped forward. "Today," she declared, "we bear witness to the truth. No longer will our past be hidden away. No longer will silence be our response to suffering." Then, Olivia Reed's voice came through the live broadcast. "We have evidence that powerful forces tried to keep this buried," she announced. Security footage, tampered archives. The truth was nearly erased. As the footage played behind her, gasps rippled through the crowd. The images were undeniable. Someone had actively tried to conceal Emma's story. Under the oak tree, Rivera knelt beside Hope, whispering, "You've carried so much sorrow on your tiny shoulders. But tonight, I promise, we will set things right." With the truth finally exposed, a wave of catharsis washed over Maplewood. Some wept, others cheered. The town, once fractured by pain and secrecy, had found a way forward. In the weeks that followed, changes swept through the community. A memorial was erected beneath the oak tree, a simple plaque that read, "In loving memory of Emma, may every lost soul find its way home." The task force, once met with skepticism, became a symbol of accountability. The police department, once divided, committed to transparency. And the town, once weighed down by its past, took its first steps toward healing. Each night, Officer Rivera continued his patrols, pausing by the oak tree where hope still slept. He had once feared that the truth might never see the light of day. But now, as the morning sun bathed the park in gold, he knew no act of compassion, no whisper of grief, and no memory of love would ever be forgotten again. There lies the promise of dawn, and that when we stand together, compassion can indeed change the world.